Okay, in this video I am going to work through the Cambridge International AS and A-Level Information Technology Practical Paper number 2 from May-June 2023. The idea of this video is to work through a relational database, including normalisation, and just to show you how I would approach and complete this task. At the end, we'll have a look at the mark scheme from Cambridge and see how the actual assignment is assessed at the end. And we're going to work through slowly, step by step. Remember, you can always stop the video, rewind, go back and have a look at there's different sections if you're unclear about anything. I'm going to work through it from stages. So the video will be in 3 main stages and then the assessment at the end. Okay, to start with, the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go down and have a look at the exam. So the exam opens up and says you've been supplied with 5 different files, right? Now, straight away I'm going to look at this and I'm going to say, okay, these 2 files here, these 2 MP3 files, they're definitely audio files, right? They're not going to be used in my database. And the CSV files, which is comma separated values, those 3 are definitely Excel file. I can open them in Excel and I can have a look at those, and they're definitely going to be used in the database. So straight away I can eliminate these 2. They must be used in a later question in the exam paper, and as you read on you'll see those 2 files are not needed. Okay, now it tells you straight away you will create a database to store details of electric cars for Tawara Eco Cars, right? So I know what I have to do. It's not the question yet, but it's telling me basically what I have to do. It says I have to do it in the most efficient method. Okay, I understand that. And here is the information provided. So from this point onward, I need to take note of all of this information. And this is where, if I'm in the exam and I've got a highlighter, there's things I might decide to highlight. I'm not sure. That's up to you as you go along. If that's your exam practice, you could highlight things. Okay, each car has a unique registration number, and that's a key straight away. As soon as it says it's unique, you're thinking, okay, that's going to be a primary key of some sort, right? So a unique registration number tells you straight away. The company manufactures 7 different types of models of cars. So in my head, I'm thinking, okay, I'm probably going to have a cars table that's going to have the 7 different types of cars. Maybe the cars will have their own model number, something like that. That's what I'm thinking. The company has vehicles in the following drive types. So I'm also thinking, okay, maybe I need a table that has the different drive types and then some sort of code that goes with, gives them a unique primary key as well. So the different drive types. So I'm automatically thinking 2 tables so far. The company manufactures cars in 8 different colors. Okay, so now we're talking about another table which might have the colors on it. So I'm up to 3 tables already in my head before I've even got to the question. The only extras available are cruise control, LED lights, satellite navigation. For each has a different cost. Cars have 1, 2 or 3 extras. So wait a minute, now I'm thinking a 4th table, right? So I'm going to have 1 table for the models, 1 table for the drive types, 1 for the different colors, and maybe 1 for the different extras that are added. Well, we have to go forward and see how we go, but that's what I'm thinking. The manufacturer costs and the sale price for each will be calculated at runtime in a query called finance. So now I know that I have to have a query called finance that's going to do these sorts of things, that do these calculations, right? So I need to keep that in the back of my mind. The cost, the sales price, it's actually telling me the math that I'm going to have to use to make that query work, okay? Use your local currency where appropriate. All field names must be consistent, short and meaningful and contain no spaces. That's pretty important there, that it says that all my fields have to have no spaces in them. And that's because when we do our SQL query, we want to make sure that the queries are going to work correctly straight away. So we have no spaces. So if I'm about to create a database, I really need to remember that, no spaces. Set referential integrity where appropriate. Okay, so as I go down to the question, I get to the question and it says examine these files. So now it's telling me it's only these 3 files. Use the data from these files and the information provided to create a relational database normalized to 3rd normal form. Right, 3NF. So you need to know this coming into the exam. What is 3NF? Use appropriate data types, field lengths, and validation routines. Now, this is actually really important. This little line here that's nearly a throwaway line is really, really important. You need to have appropriate data types, field lengths, which I can tell you will be marked on the lengths of the fields, and validation routines, right? So we need to make sure those three things are in our database before we get started. We need to make sure that we set it up correctly. Then it says this is how you need to save your file, and it says cars, and then the number, and then a number, candidate number, center number, that sort of thing, right? So this is important too. One of the things in the marking assessment, in the marking paper says, if you don't save the file correctly, you fail, right? If they can't open up and check your file, you fail. So you need to make sure all of these one-liners are all relevant and all really important. Now, third normal form. This is something that a lot of students struggle with, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start making the database using these three different files, and I'm going to do it in first normal form. Then I'm going to add my second normal form, then I'm going to add my third normal form. Now, this is going to increase the time this video takes, but I think it will help with comprehension and understanding of how the video works and how the database works in the end. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at first normal form. I'm going to do this really quickly because you should know this going into the exam, but it's good to revise this as well anyway. So normalization is the process of structuring a relational database, right? So it's structuring it so that the database works better, so that there's not clashes, so that things run smoothly, and when people run queries on it, they use the database, that it actually works correctly. So we're going to look at first normal form here first. Now, basically, each normal form has a set of rules, and these rules, you have to follow these rules, otherwise it's not normalized. So when they're asking you to normalize a database, you have to follow these set of rules. And the rules I've put in the bullet points. So the first one is you have to have data that is broken down to its simplest form. So it can't be two bits of data put into one frame or one cell together and said, oh, that's one bit of data. No, it has to be broken down into its lowest common form. So for example here, we've got the name here, John Smith. But really, John could be the first name and Smith could be the family name, right? So this is not broken down. This is non-atomic, right? It hasn't been broken down into its lowest form. If we go to the second one, we've got first name, which is John, and surname, which is Smith. So this one is correct. The second one is correct because it can't go any smaller than that. We can't make the person's name break down any further. That's the lowest form is John, and that's the lowest form is Smith. Now the next element that you have to have for first normal form is that each row or record has a primary key and it's unique, okay? So in this one here, John Smith, it's got a couple of telephone numbers, but it's not unique. There could be lots of different Johns in the world, and there could be lots of different Smiths in the world, and there's no way that if I'm searching through a database of thousands of names that I might not find more than one John or more than one Smith. So that's the first thing. There's no primary key here to make this person unique because the person's not unique. The other thing is it's got two sets of data in here that's not unique. Like it's got a telephone number and it's got another telephone number. And yeah, plenty of people have two telephone numbers. But how do you know if you do a search on the database which telephone number is going to come up? Because it's not unique. So this is not going to work, right? This is not normalized, this first section. So if we go down to the second one here, we've put in a student number. So the student number, it's 0157. It's at its lowest form. It's unique. There's only going to be one student called 0157. The first name is at its lowest form, the surname's at its lowest form, and we have one telephone number. So we haven't got duplicate data or any of those things. It's unique, right? There's only one telephone number. Now, if you had to have in your database, you had to have two phone numbers, you might call one of them home phone or telephone, and the second one might be mobile, or the third one might be work or office or business. So they would still have unique headings, and therefore you could have multiple phone numbers, but they're going to be under their own unique heading. Whereas telephone, it just doesn't work. So this one here is correct. All right, so the next part of first normal form are these three things here, and I'm going to go through all three of these together. No mixed data types, no repeating data, and the row order has no relevance. Okay, so if we have a look here, we've got two students in here, and we've got one named Jane Doe and one named John Smith. Now they've been put in this order because Jane alphabetically comes before John, and there's no unique ID in here, so they've been put in that order so that you think Jane comes first before John. But the reality is, unless you know that the first names are in alphabetical order, or there's just no way to search in this situation. So this is incorrect because row order has no relevance whatsoever in a database. When you're looking at a database with thousands and thousands of different rows, you can't say that row order is relevant, right? So this is wrong purely because of those two names at the start. But it's also got repeating data. It's got a column for date of birth, but it's also got one DOB, which is also sort of recognised as date of birth. So it's got repeating data. It's got data in there twice. It just might be typed in differently or have different column names. So that makes this wrong as well. Also, it's got mixed data types. Now what that means is, if you have a look at this first one, it's written as the month, then the date, and then the year. Now this one down here is written as the date, then the month, then the year. And this one is written as the same as here, it's written as the month, and then the date, and then the year, but it's separated by full stops instead of separated by backslashes. And this one's got a little TH and a shortened February. So these are all mixed data types, and you can't have that in a first normalized form database. You can't have that. You need to choose one way that you're going to enter the data, and it has to be consistent all the way through. Now, one little footnote to remember here is that in the US and US countries, they put the month first and then they put the date, right? So this would be January the 12th, whereas in UK and other areas of society, they put in the day first, then the month, then the year, right? So you need to keep that into account when you're creating your database, which way you're going to do that. Now, let's have a look at this one. This has two student IDs, and you can see actually Jane Doe's student ID is lower than John's student ID in terms of numerical value, but that's showing that row order has no relevance. So that's really important. The row order, the order that you put them in, it actually has no relevance whatsoever. If we did a sort by student number, Jane would be above John. But if we're doing sort by on some other column, then it doesn't really matter. The row order has no relevance whatsoever. First names are separate, date of births are in the same format. So this is first normal form. So now that we've got first normal form, let's get to our files and have a look at our Excel files. So if we go back to the exam, it says there's one called J23 Cars, J23 Extra, J23 Paint. So I'm just going to jump over to Excel here, and here is J23 Cars. And you can see it's got lots of information here for me. It's got registration, model name, model cost, color, drive, body, extras, and year. Now, remember when I read through the exam to start with, I said, model and model, I probably would put them onto one separate table, and drive, I probably would put them onto a separate table. But for first normal form, which is going to be a flat database to start with, which is just one table, I don't need to do that, right? So I can put all of this onto one table to start with if I want to do it that way, okay? So that's where we're at with first normal form. Now, if I look at the other two Excel files, the extras file, well, it has codes and some extras and then extra costs. Now, looking at this straight away, I'm thinking, that's going to be my primary key, okay? So I'm thinking maybe primary key there. If I go back and look at JC Cars, though, there are some that are blank, that have nothing in there. So maybe I need to think about, if there's a blank, what would be the link to the relational database if there's a blank? So maybe I have to put in one here that's blank and has no extras, no cost, so no extras, no cost. Maybe I need to do that as well. So I'll think about that as we go along. And then if we have a look at the third table, it has a paint code in here, which I'm really happy about. It's got a paint code here, it's got different color paints, and then this has got the paint breakdown, the way the paint is put together. In actual fact, I've deleted one line off the top here, but it was paint code, paint color, and then the paint breakdown. Now, the interesting thing about the paint breakdown is it has a decimal point in it. So when I'm putting my data types together, I need to be thinking this can't be an integer. This needs to be a float or a real number, so that when I'm putting my table together for this one, I've got to remember that. And this one, I'm going to think of this as my primary key. Okay, now let's get started on making our first database. Now, I'm working on a Mac, but you could do this exactly the same on a PC. PC and Mac are exactly the same for this. I'm using a program called MAMP. Now, I'm just going to open up my map, and it runs essentially a database on your local computer. You don't have to be online, you don't have to set up a system or anything. This just runs a local database. So I start up map, it says, do I want to run map 6? No, I don't want to run map 6. Pro, I just want to run this map, and I hit start. Okay, so when it starts, it'll open up a web page, and it's like a virtual server. And I'm going to go to my tools, and I'm going to go to PHP My Admin. I'll click on PHP My Admin there, and you can see I'm into a SQL database right here. So now we have PHP My Admin open, and we're going to create a new database. Now, I want to do this exactly according to the exam. So I'm going to go back to the exam, and it says you will create a database to store the details of electric cars for Tawa Eco Cars. So I'm going to go and I'm going to highlight that. I'm just going to say Command C. I'm going to copy that. So I've got the exact name that they want me to call my database, so the examiners can't say I haven't done the wrong thing. So I go here, I'm going to click up on here, and I'm going to click on New. And in here I'm going to say Create Database, and I'm going to call the database Tawa Eco Cars, and I'm going to leave it like that. However, before I press go and create that database, if I go back to the exam says all the tables must not contain any spaces, no spaces. So that's for the tables. All field names must be consistent, short and meaningful, and contain no spaces. Now that does say for the tables, but just to be safe, just to be sure, so that the examiner can't turn around and say, oh, you put spaces in your database, I'm actually going to take that space out. I'm going to leave it like that. I might even take that symbol out, the minus symbol out, so that I know that the SQL will be able to deal with this. Is one word here, and it's camel case, so I know that it'll be able to deal with it. So I'm going to call my database Tawa Eco Cars, and I'm going to hit create. And so now it's created a database, and if you go down here, it's created here, but it doesn't have any tables in it, and I need to add some tables into this database. So here it takes me straight to create a new table, and it says 4 columns. But I don't want 4 columns. I want to go to my Excel file, which they provided me from the A level from Cambridge. So I want to count how many columns I need. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 9 columns, and remember, I'm looking at first normal form at the moment. So I'm going to create all 9 columns. So I'm going to go to here, and I'm going to say, all right, I want 9 columns. And remembering that it has a unique registration, I'm going to say that this is going to be my primary key, my registration, and I'm actually just going to count how many characters are in the registration. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm just going to do a quick run down through the file and see if any of them look like they're more than 7, just visually to see if they look like they're more than 7. And they don't. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it looks like I need 7 characters for my primary key. And I've got the names of the different files here, of each one here, but some of them do have spaces. So for ease of work, I'm actually going to move this down to the bottom of the page here, and I'm going to go back to my database here and just drag this up a little bit so I can now see the names of all of the different columns that I'm going to have here. I'm going to create 9 columns, and this first table I'm going to call J23 cars. I'm going to call it exactly that, J23 cars, so that I know I'm using my J23 cars file into my table name here, and I've got to have 9 columns. So I'm going to hit create. So it's created that for me. Now, here are my 9 entry fields. Now this is really important. This is the section where you're going to get a lot of marks, or you're going to lose a lot of marks. So we want to make sure that we get this right. So the first one I'm going to call is registration. One word, no gaps, copying my table, registration. Now the next one says model name, and I'm actually going to do this with camel case, which is where it has upper and lowercase letters, an uppercase letter in the middle, but no spaces. So I'm going to leave that as model name. I'm going to go down to here, model cost. So I'm following the instructions from the exam to the letter, exactly the way that they've asked me to do it. Color, drive type, drive cost, body style, extras, and year. Now, in terms of all of those should be correct. I follow them exactly, And remember, we're still looking at first normal form, so I haven't moved models out and I haven't moved the drive out onto a different table. I've got them all just on one table to start with, and that looks correct to me. Now, the next thing is our data type. And our data type, this is where I think you'll get extra marks. So, registration, I know that if I go back to my Excel file and have a quick look at it, it has letters and characters. So it can't be an integer. It's not a float. It has to be variable characters, right? So I'm going to put variable characters in there. Now, I also know that it has 7 places. So I'm going to say I want that to have 7 places. I also know that I want this to be my primary key. So I'm going to go across here and I'm going to choose primary key. And so, do you want it to be the primary key? Yes, I do. I want it to be the primary key. So that's my primary key for that section. And now that I know that that column is going to be set up correctly. My next one, model name has text in it. Now the text, again, will have different lengths because depending on the type of model name, it'll have different lengths. Now I think there, the longest word, alpha drive, comfort drive, looks like it's the longest spelling word there. So I'm going to look at comfort drive. I'm going to say, okay, that has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So I think 12 is my longest one that goes into my model name. So I'm going to go to here. I'm going to say, all right, it needs to be 12 in length. It needs to be varchar because it's variable characters. It's not numbers. So it's going to be in there as 12. Then I'm going to go to my next one, which is my model cost. They all look like they're 4 characters long. Same thing, quick visual check to make sure that none of them are longer than 4 characters, which they're not. So I'm going to make sure this one is an integer, and I'm going to say that it goes 4 characters. Now, because there are no integer costs in there, there's no coins or cents or 50 cents left over or anything, I'm not going to make it a float. I'm going to leave it as an integer because they're whole numbers, right? So that's why I'm going to leave that one there. Right, next one is colour, and colour has some really long things. Midnight blue, metallic grey, so I'm going to have to do varchar in here for my characters, and I'm going to have to count up at least midnight blue. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Count the space 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Right, metallic 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Now, so I could go exactly 13. Now, in my head, I could also think, all right, maybe they might add a different color later and a different model, a different design. So maybe I'll give it 30 or I'll give it more characters. But the exam paper says you have to have the exact amount of characters, the right amount of spaces, right? So no spaces, short, meaningful, contains, must be consistent, referential integrity, the correct field length. Just here, it says the correct field length. So I'm going to say, all right, the actual correct field length is 13. So I'm going to put in here 13 spaces. Then we go to our drive type. So back to my Excel file. Back to my Excel file, drive type has, they all appear to be 1 letter. 1 character. Yep, I've checked them all. They all seem to be 1 character. So my drive type is going to be 1 character. And while I'm doing this, I might as well have a quick look at my drive cost, and they all seem to be an integer 4 characters. So I'm going to go to here, and I'm going to say, all right, this one's going to be a varchar, and it's going to be 1 character. This one's going to be an integer, and it's going to be 4 characters. Then I'm going to go down and just check the next one, which is our body style. Hatchback 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Hatchback looks like the longest. Hatchback. Right, so I'm going to make sure that that's 9 for my body style. So body style, varchar, 9 spaces. Extras, 1, 2, 3, that's the longest. I know CLS is the longest. So I'm going to say varchar. Now, the only thing is I'm thinking that in some of these, they have a blank. Yeah, no, that's okay. So I'm gonna actually say to this one, yep, extras, let's make it 3 maximum, but I'm also gonna go over to here and just see this one that says null. I'm actually gonna allow that to be null, which means it has no value in there. So I'm just gonna click null and say, if there's no value, that's actually okay. We're gonna allow that to be null. And the last one is going to be year, and the year is just the year, it's 4 characters. Now there's several ways we could do this. We could go into here and we could put date, but if we do date, it's going to ask for the format of 4 characters, the month, and then the days, right? So you can actually see there's a little preview. Just if I go to here and I click on date, you can see there's a little preview there showing how the date structure would want to be. Now I don't want to do that. I just want it to be just the month. So I'm actually just going to put on integer, and I'm going to leave the integer at 4 days, at 4 characters. So there's my 4 characters. I've added null there, got my primary key, looks good. I'm going to come down the bottom here and I'm going to click save. Now, it actually seems to have done it. Looks like it's right. I can see my structure. I can go through and look at it. Remember, if I want to change anything, I can always click change and change them over here. If I really am frustrated and I've got something really completely wrong, I can press drop and I could drop that whole column there if I want to. If I need to add a column, I can add a column here. I can put it at the start, beginning, end, after, wherever I like. So basically my structure there looks correct. I'm also going to go to browse and I should see them across the top here. Here's my columns, I can see all of them, and there's no data in there yet. I haven't imported anything. So that looks pretty good for me. As a first table, J23 cars, I think that looks pretty good. Okay, so we've created the first table. We need to create the 2 new tables in here. I'm going to go to the left-hand side where it says new here, and we're going to add our extras table and our paint table. So if I go down to my Excel file and just make sure I get all the naming conventions right, I've got one called J23 paint and one called J23 extras. So I'll do the extras one first, right? So we call this J23 EXTRAS, extras, in fact lowercase e. Extras, and on that J23 extras we have 3 columns, and they are extras code, extras, and extras cost. Right, so extras code, extras, and extras cost. Okay, so we've got 3 different columns there. The first one, extras code, is 3 characters, and I want to make that my primary key. Right, so I'm going to go varchar, I'm going to make that 3, I'm going to choose that to be a primary key, I'm going to say go. Okay, then we get to our extra section here, and I've got a problem with this extra section here because it's actually got some of these that have got 3 sections of data in them, and I don't want 3 sections of data in one column, so that's not going to work for our normalization. But for the purpose of putting this table together first to make sure it's all working, I'm going to leave it as is, but I can always go back and change it. I'm going to make it a varchar, and I'm going to give it plenty of space. I'm going to give it 64 characters in length, so it's got plenty of space to fill in all those 3 words that are there. I'll leave that as it is, and then the next one is extras cost, which is an integer, and it's going to be 4 characters, and I hit save. So now I've set up this as a primary key, which is going to be our codes. It's going to link across to our J3 cars here, which is extras, and I could even change that title. In fact, I probably will change that title from extras into extras code, so that the actual code comes in there correctly, and we can link that across, and I'll do that very shortly. First thing I'll do is create this next table. So we want to go to new again. We're going to call this J23 paint. Okay, exactly the same as the Excel file. Let me just go down and check my Excel file down here. Let's get rid of extras. Let's have a look at paint. J23 paint. It has 3 columns. First one was paint code, paint color, paint breakdown. So let's go to here. Paint code, paint color. In fact, let's just call it color and paint breakdown. Okay, now paint code I know is an integer and it only goes up to 9, so we only need 1 character. That's going to be our primary key, but I'm not going to do that yet. I'm just going to hold off making that my primary key right at this stage, because there's a logical link we can make here for setting up our relational database to start with, which is color, right? So I'm going to go to varchar, I'm going to go to 13, and I'm actually going to make this my primary key to start with, and I'll show you why I've done this to start with, just to make sure that our database is going to work. Paint breakdown, remember this one can't be varchar, this one has to be float because it has decimal points. So if I go back here to my Excel and just check that, it could have 1.25, which would be 4 characters long. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to make my float, and I'm going to make it 4 characters long. Now we've got a couple of issues here, okay? So the first one is, in a perfect world, paint code is going to be my primary key. And in fact, later, I'm going to try and change that paint code over to be my primary key. But for the short term, to check if my relational database is actually going to work, I'm going to make color my primary key. So I've decided to do that, and I'm going to link it across, and you'll see why in just a moment. So I'm just going to hit save, and that'll save that, and that seems to have worked. Now if I go to my J23 cars, I know I've got a color column here, and I know I've got an extra column here. But in my extras, it's actually called extras code. So I'm going to go back to my database here, I'm going to go to structure, and I'm actually going to look at that one that's called extras, and I'm going to say change. And I'm going to change that to extras code. Now I've also made sure it is a varchar and it is 3, so it's still going to match. So the expectations for this extra 3 varchar 3 will match my extras code, and the structure of that as a primary key is varchar 3. Now if I do the same for color, if I check on here the structure of my first database, color varchar 13, and if I go to my paint here, I could have color, which is varchar 13, and it's a primary key. So now if I go to do my, my links with my primary key to make this a relational database, it should work really easily. So let's go to relational view. I want to choose on update's going to cascade. So I'm on my actual J23 cars file. On delete, I want to restrict deleting so that I don't get redundant data in these. In other words, if I delete some data, I don't leave some data left over. So on delete, I'm going to restrict that so that if I delete, I have to delete everything. This one's on update, so if I update one of the files, it's going to update all of the different files. So that's going to work. Now the column I want to change here is color. And the color I want to go and get from the paint table, and I want to choose the color, the primary key. So that should make a relationship between my cars table and my paint table based on the color column. So let's hit save. That went green, that seemed to work. If I go and browse my database and then go back to structure, you'll see there's a little silver key there. So that seems to have worked. Now I'm going to do the same thing with this extra code. So I'm on my 23 cars. I go to my structure, I look at my relational view, I'm going to choose on update, I'm going to hit cascade again. I'm going to say this time I want to update the extras code. I want to find it from the extras table, and I want the extras code, and I hit save, and that should have worked as well. So now if I go browse, check my structure, I've got 2 foreign keys coming in from the other tables as primary keys, and I've still got my primary key on here. So that actually all looks great to me. It looks like it's all set up and it's all structured, and it looks like it's going to be okay. So let's test it, and I suppose the best way for me to test it is to import data into the database from their CSV files. So let's go ahead and do that. Now to do this, I go to the table that I want to import data, and I click the import button. Now I'm going to start with on the paint table, and I've done that for a reason because I've already tested this, and I would like to show you what I found. So if I go to my original paint file that you've seen several times throughout the video, it goes from 1 to 8, it has the colors of the paint, and then it has the color breakdown. Now, the first column here is going to be an integer. It should be an integer with one character. So if I actually look at the structure, it actually says integer 1 character. So I know that's correct. Then if I go to here, it's got text, which is variable characters, and this one has a decimal, so it's going to be a float. So I can see all of that is correct up here on my table. However, the original file that came from the examiners had a heading on it. So I'm just going to show you that really quickly and show you what happens, right? So here's the one with the heading, and it has paint code, color, and color factor down here in the corner. You can see it's got those. Now that is not an integer with 1 character, so that's going to error if you try and import that. Color probably would work because it's a variable character, but the color factor won't work either because it's a float. So this is going to cause us an error. So what I did is I highlighted this line and I pressed delete. I deleted that line because I don't need the headings. I've got the headings in my table structure. So I removed those headings, and so therefore my file looks like this without headings, and it's ready to go and ready to import. So I go across to the import section, I make sure I'm on my paint folder, on my paint table, I click on my import button, I click on choose file. I choose the paint file, the one that I've corrected, and I click upload. Then I'm going to go down the screen and I'm going to check on the formatting, and I want to check that it says CSV, comma separated values, that's the type of file that we're using, and I want to make sure that my data, all of my data information, the formatting is set up for the CSV. So I just make sure it says CSV there, then all this formatting should be fine. Now all I have to do is press the import button and all of that data should import perfectly. So I click import and I get lots of green things. Now green is good. If you see lots of red things, then you've probably got an error or there's a mistake that you've made. But I've put this and it's got all green things. So now I'm going to actually go and browse the table, and you can see my 10 bits of information, my 8 bits of information have come in here, of data have come in here, my colours have come in here, and my paint breakdown has come in here. So that information has actually imported correctly, and I'm really pleased with that. So that's my first table ready to go. Okay, so we've done the paint file, so now let's do the extras file. So I'm just going to go to the extras one here, and I've got my 3 columns set up. Look at my structure, I've got my primary key, so there shouldn't be any issues here either. So I'm going to go to import and I'm going to choose my file and I'm going to choose my extras file and I'm going to hit upload. Now, if we go back and have a look at my actual Excel file, I'm going to show you this time. Go to my Excel file here and I still have headings here, okay? So this time I'm actually going to import it with the headings so you can see what an error is, because I think you learn a lot from seeing the errors as much as you do at just working perfectly. So I'm just going to import it like this. So I've got it like that. It's my CSV file, extras. It's a CSV there. I can see all my information and I hit import and I get a red error straight away, okay? And the red error says data is too long for the column in extras column row 1, right? So if I'm going to go and look at my extras column and I'm going to browse it and there's nothing in there, no data's come in, but I look at my structure and it says my extras code should be varchar 3 characters only. But if I look here, I've got variable characters, but I've got maybe 10 characters there and I'm only allowed 3. So that's why it's saying this is too long, this row. Now, if I remove that extras heading, I'm still going to get an error on here because this should be an integer and we've got it coming in as variable characters. So this is what I actually did. I click on there and I control click and I say delete, and it deletes the whole row. So now I know that the data coming in doesn't have headings. It should be all fine. I'm just going to hit save on that, which I've done, save. So now if I try and input the data, it should work perfectly. So I'm just going to go to choose. Let's choose extras, upload, check my CSV, check that my data's going, hit import, and I'm green across the board. So I know it was the headings that was causing the issues, not the actual data itself. And if I actually go and browse that, I can see, here we go, here are all my codes, and here is my different things that go here and my extra costs. Now this leads us to our next issue, which is going to be importing our main information, our main set of data on our first table. So I'm just going to close out of this extras one for just a moment. Now if we go and have a look at our data here, and this is a trick that I think they've put in the exam, maybe to catch you out, or maybe it's just the way that they set up their structure, I'm not sure. So the first thing we're going to look at, I'm just going to zoom this in a little bit as well so you can see it a little bit better. The first thing we're going to look at is the same thing that I've just mentioned. The heading registration, it's going to be variable character, but it's going to be too long for this. This would be okay. This is supposed to be an integer, so that's not going to work. 1 character, that's not going to work. This should be an integer. So the first thing I'm going to be looking at is deleting that heading line, exactly the same as we did before, so that now I know my data will work. So that's problem number 1. Problem number 2 I have here is we've got these extras codes, CLSC, LC, CLSL, but we've got one here that's blank. Now, if it's blank, the database is going to say, oh, wait a minute, why are you trying to enter data into here that's blank? It doesn't work, right? So there's a couple of ways around this. So I'm going to give you one workaround that I like to use, but I'm going to show you different ways to do it. When we get here to the extras code, it says, can it be null, which means can it have nothing in it? And it says no, right? So that means if you try and import the data with nothing in there, it's going to say no. So if I go to here to change, and I say, okay, will we allow null? And I put a little tick on there, and then I go save. Now it should import the data, and if there's nothing in there, it should import it all perfectly. So let's have a look, let's try that. Better go back and save my Excel file. So just get Command S, save my file, and let's go and see if that works. So go back to my import, hit choose file, choose my main J23 cars, upload, choose the CSV, check the formatting and hit import. Now I'm getting a red error, right? I'm getting a key constraint error. Oh no, there's a problem. There's a problem with your foreign key, something like that. Now if I look at my structure or browse what's in there, not the structure, browse what's in there, some things have actually come in. And I can see, oh, some of this stuff's actually come in. But what do you notice hasn't come in? The things that are null, right? The things that have got no gap, they're the ones that haven't come in. And so that doesn't work for me. We need to import all of the data, not just some of the data. So I'm actually going to drop all of this data. So how we do this is I go to operations and I go down to the very bottom here and I just say, okay, I want to empty this table, just this table, not any others, just this table. So I'm going to delete all of that data. I go, okay. So now I can go back and start again and have another look. Okay, so there's my structure, it's still the same. Browse my data and my data all looks okay. So how am I going to deal with this extras code, which is a primary key over here on the extras that has nothing in it? Okay, so it's kind of an issue for us. So what I'm going to do, and this is a workaround, and there are plenty of different ways you can do this, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to enter some data into this, and I'm going to allow for nothing, which will have no cost, and the explanation can be no extras, right? Just a standard car, stock standard car. So let's go to insert, and I get this section here. And it says, all right, what value do you want to put in there? Well, I'm going to put nothing, right? And I've allowed it to have nothing in there. I've said null is okay, so I'm just going to put nothing in there. I'm just going to leave it. In here, I'm just going to write none. No extras, none. And the cost for no extras, well, that's 0. Costs us nothing. It's not going to cost the buyer anything extra to have no extras added on the cart, so to speak. So I hit go. And I get a green row. It says 1 row is inserted. I'm going to have a look at my structure and have a look, and now I've got in here nothing, which has none, which costs nothing. So it's not going to cost the user anything to buy a car. So now let's go back to my main cars table, and I'm going to say import, and I'm going to say choose, and I'm going to allow for my cars file, and I'm going to say upload, and then I'm going to check all the formatting, check everything works, and hit import. And it says 261 files have gone in successfully. Now I can check that because I can go here and say, right, I've deleted my headings, I'm starting at 1, there should have been, scroll all the way down the bottom, 261 entries, which there has been, so I now know all of the data is entered. If I browse that, I can go through and look at my data. Yes, there's spaces for blanks. Yes, that all looks to be correct. It's not in the same order. Remember when we talked about normalization, there is no order of the rows. It's put it in, and it's probably sorted it according to registration automatically. It's probably done that. So in fact, it looks like it has alphabetically according to registration. You can sort it whichever way you like. So at this stage, I feel like I've created a relational database. So I have 3 tables here that all have primary keys. The primary keys all link to each other. I can test that by, if I click on the extras code here, the S is now interactive. So I can click, what is an S for extras code? And I click on it and it tells me S is satellite navigation. So I can go back to my car over here and I can say, all right, what is LS? And it's going to say to me, well, LS is LED lighting and satellite navigation. Okay, so it's kind of telling me exactly what I want it to do. So I know that has a relationship to my other table. I can check these ones, color. I can say, all right, click on black. And if I click on black, it tells me it's paint color code 2 and its paint breakdown is 1. Okay, so I could do that. Now, paint breakdown, it's not exactly the same as they had on their file, but it works, right? Paint breakdown is the way that it works. So at the moment, I think I've completed my first section of the whole database according to first normal form, and I can check it, right? Is my data atomic? Well, yes, it is. I've separated all the names out. I've separated everything out so that it's at its lowest form. The only one that I'm going to question about that, which we're going to address, is when we go to the extras and we've got 2 different extras or 3 different extras in here. So I'm going to go and address that anyway. So I'm aware of that in my head. So that's the only one I've got that may be a question there. Are my rows unique? Yes, every single one of my rows are unique. I know that that's correct, so I can give that a big tick. So I'm at first normal form. Have I got mixed data types? No, my data's all correct. I know that it's all entered. It's not mixed data types, so that's correct. Is anything repeating? No, nothing is repeating, okay? Well, is it or isn't it? So I'll just ask you a question on that one. If I look at my main table and I say here my color black, there's my color black right there, and I click on it and go to here, well, it does say black again, but I'm not sure if that's repeating or not. So that's one that I'm going to keep in the back of my mind as well for when we move on. Is it repeating in one table? Absolutely not. It's absolutely perfect in terms of that. So that's where we're at with first normal form. That's where we're at with the first section of the database. From this point on, I'm going to be talking about second normal form and then on to third normal form. Okay, so now we're at a stage where we're looking at moving on to second normal form. So if I go to my Word document, which just tells us a little bit about our normal forms, and I go to second normal form, the first thing it says is the table must be in first normal form. Now I think it's in first normal form, but I'm also pretty sure I've left a few little things out. So before I can even move on to second normal form, I'm just going to error check myself and make sure that we've got things right. And then we can go on and talk about non-key attributes depending on every part of the primary key. We'll talk about that in a minute. But let's just check, because I can't even start second normal form until I'm definitely in first normal form. So I'm going to have a quick look back at the exam question section to make sure that I've covered all the questions, the expectations. So here we are, back at the exam. So the exam says, each car has a unique registration number. I've done that. That's a primary key. That seems to work. The company manufactures 7 different models of cars. So on my first read through, I said, well, then I probably need a models table. So if I go back here and I look at my tables here, I can see I have a model's name and a model cost. Now the model name could be my primary key. I could say, okay, the model name is going to be my primary key, and then the model cost, I don't need that on this table. I actually don't need it on this J23 cars table. I actually probably would be better off putting both of those or one of those onto a separate table, and that's part of normalization. In fact, it helps with our second normal form as well. The other thing that I looked at when I looked at my exam question is, down here, it's got to have short, meaningful names. And if I look at my table here, J23 cars is not a short, meaningful name. J23, it doesn't really mean anything. This really should just be called my cars table. So if I go up into my options, I clicked on my cars table, I go up into my operations, and I want to sort of rename this table. So if I go to this section right here, J23 cars, I'm just going to call this cars. So I just think that that is a better, more meaningful table name for this one. So I click on cars, I click on, where's my go? Just here, go. And it's gone through and it's changed my name to cars. It's short, it's meaningful. I think that's more important. I'm going to do the same thing with extras. Go to my operations, go here, I'm going to call it extras. I'm going to hit go. Short, meaningful. I'm following the expectations of the exam. I'm going to go to here. I'm going to go to operations. I'm going to change J23, here to paint. And I'm going to hit go. Okay, so the first thing is I've gone through and I've fixed that. Now, I did say I wanted to make 2 new tables. So I've got model name, model cost. I think I'm going to make model name my primary key, and then I'm going to have cost. The cost will relate to the type of the model, right? And I'm not going to need all of these massive amount of information on this first table. So I'm going to create a new table. I'm going to call this table model, simple, short, name, easy. I'm going to put in here model name, camel case. I'm going to make it a variable character. I'm going to make it, I think I have 13 characters long was my characters. Here I'm going to put model cost. And the model cost, I'm actually going to change to a float, because it should have 2 decimal places, right? So I'll actually put it as 4 characters with 2 decimal places and the decimal point. So I'm going to say 4, 5, 6, 7 characters long. and I'm going to do that, and they're going to be my 2. Now I'm going to change this one to my primary key, which is my model name, and I'm going to hit OK, go, and then I should have, whoops, I'm going to hit save down here, and I should have my new table in here, which is my model. Okay, now I need to somehow move the data from model name and model cost into my model, which I can do through Excel. I can just delete all the other columns and just import it straight in again. So that should work, and I'm going to try and do that in just a moment. Or I can go through and work out how many different models there are and just type them in. Either way, the costs are going to be the same. A finesse is 3,100 and a finesse up here is 3,100. That's the point of putting it on another table. You don't need this redundant data that you're repeating the same information over and over again, which you don't need. It can all be sitting on the models table. Okay, next one is drive type. So we've got drive type here and drive cost. I think the drive type here is my primary key, so I can remove the drive cost here, so I can make a new table, and I'm going to call it simply drive. I'm going to put in here drive type. And I'm going to put in here drive cost. I'm going to make this a variable character, but I know that they're all only 1 letter long, so I'm just going to be 1 character long, leave it like that, and I'm going to make that my primary key. Hit OK. Drive cost, which is a cost, it's going to be a float. I'm going to 4 characters, plus my 2 decimal points is 6, plus the actual dot itself, give myself a bit of room, I'm going to say 7, and I'm going to hit save on there. And so now I've set up my drive table. So now I've actually got 5 tables, and I'm pretty happy with the way that that's looking. Now, this is what I was saying about the model. I could go through and choose all of the different types of models, put their costs next to them, and add them to that table, which I'm going to do in just a moment. I could go to the drive off my cars table, and I could say, all right, these are the different drive types, these are the costs that go with them, and I can add them to that table. Now I can either do that in here just by going to model and then entering some information into here. If I want to insert, I go through and insert what I wanted as the information here, or I can do that on Excel. I can do that either way. If I do it in Excel, then I can import it. If I do it on here, it just means typing it out. Either way of those is going to work. So we'll go ahead and do that in just a moment. Right, now there's a few other things that I want to talk about here. In my paint section here, we are using color as the primary key and not the paint code. But I actually want to use the paint code. I think the paint code is more important than the actual having the words color here, and then we can use the paint code in a lot of different areas, right? So I need to work out a way to change from that over to that on my main table, right? So there's a way to do that, which I'll show you in just a moment. All right, so now I'm ready to put the data into my models table. Now, if I remember, I go back to the exam and I look at the exam and it says there are 7 different models of cars. So I'm going to actually go back to Excel. I'm going to open up my cars file, and I'm going to say, all right, I don't need the registration column. I don't need the color of the paint, the drive type, all those things. The only thing I need is the model type and the price. That's all I need. So I'm going to actually highlight those ones, and I'm going to delete these columns. I don't need them. So now I'm left with my model and my cost of that model. Now my exam said there were 7, so I need to make sure I've got 7 different types of cars and their costs. So Alpha, Comfort, New, so it's 3. Alpha we don't need to repeat, so let's get rid of that one there. We don't need that, we've already got it up there. Finesse, New we've now got, Alpha we've got, but Better Drive's a new one, so let's get that, so let's delete that. Finesse, we've got that, let's delete this. Now we've got Eco and Dura Drive, so that should give me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different cars, same as the exam said. So all of this other data, all I'm doing is repeating what I've got up the top, so it's redundant data. So I can go through and I can delete that. I can go all the way down, delete all of this redundant data, I don't need it, press delete. So now I've got my 7 different types of cars, I've got the price for those 7 different models, and I can say File, Save As. I'm going to call this Models, and I make sure it's a comma separated values, it's a CSV file, and I hit Save. So I've now got my models and their price. So now if I go back to my database where I've set up this table, I'm just going to check the structure really carefully. I've got model name, primary key, 13 characters, model cost, which is a float. I'm going to import my information into here, choose my models CSV and hit upload. This is the same as what we've done earlier in the video. Go down, check that it's CSV, check that all this information is correct, hit import, and I get greens across the board. Now if I go back to my model and I check it, I can see I've got my model names and I've got my model costs. Now remember, I've made this model name a primary key. So on my main tables, my main cars table, I would now like to make that a primary key, the model name primary key, and delete this model costs. So let's go to the structure of this table. Let's tick the model costs right here. I'll put a little tick next to model costs right there, and I'm going to drop that line. I don't need the costs in there anymore. It's redundant data. So I've deleted that whole column. So now if we go back and have a look at our table, have a browse of our table, my whole model costs have gone. Now I've still got model names, but I haven't made that link to the primary key of the model name. So let's go back to structure. Let's go to relational view. Let's choose on cascade. This is the same as we've done for our other relationships. I'm going to choose from the model name is what I'm looking, the column that I want to change. I'm going to choose the model table and it's automatically come into the model name, and I'm going to hit save. And it came up with a green, so it looks like my query is correct. So now let's go back and browse that and make sure that's correct. Model name, these are now interactive. If I click Eco Drive here, it tells me that's the cost of an Eco Drive car. If I go back to my cars table and I click on the finesse, it tells me that's the cost of the finesse. So we've built the relationship to the models table. We've removed data that didn't need to be on the first table, and in fact that's part of our second normalization, second normal form, which I'll show you in just a moment. But we're also making our first normal form correct as well, right? So we're sort of addressing two areas at the same time before we get to our second normal form. Okay, so now we're up to the drive section, and we're going to do the drive section. We're going to import the data here. But before we do that, I would like to go back and talk about the second normal form, because one of the things you'll notice is as you're building this relational database, you kind of work on little elements of first normal form and second normal form and third normal form. You work on them as you're going along, and it's better if you have a good understanding of that. And actually one of the things we're doing at the moment is kind of a part of second normal form. We are cleaning up and making sure we achieve first normal form correctly, but we are actually doing a few little elements of second normal form. So if I go back to my definition of second normal form, the table must be in first normal form. We're doing that. We're making sure that's correct. But it also says non-key attributes must be dependent on every part of the primary key. And now the drive section is a good example of how I can explain how this works. Non-key attributes, so not primary keys, must be dependent on the primary keys. Okay, so that's what it's saying. So let's go back and have a look at our drive section here. Now, if we look here at the E drive, right, and even if we go back to the exam, see what the E represents electric cell, right? So the electric cell cars cost $2,500 for that drive type. Now, in this situation, our primary key is the registration of the car. But in reality, the cost of an electric cell car, that cost has nothing to do with the registration of the car. If it's not on this car, the electric one's down here, it still costs $2,500 for the electric cell. And if I go down further, here, $2,500 for the electric cell. So in this situation, this is a non-key. It's not a primary key, but it's also not dependent on the primary key here. So this does not achieve second normal form. This number here, 2,500, really is dependent on the drive type, on the name of the drive. So if I'm about to make a new table, and I've said on the new table the drive type will be the primary key, you can see in my structure I've done that, the drive type will be the primary key, then the cost of the drive type will be dependent on what the primary key is. And so if I go back to my Word and just check that what it says, it means my non-key, my cost of my drive type will be dependent on the drive, which is on the drive code, which is the primary key. So then that would be correct. So I'll just explain that really quickly one more time. If we look at the cars here, the cost of this drive has nothing to do with the registration really. The cost of the drive is dependent on the drive type. So if I make the drive type on its own table a primary key, the cost is related to that primary key. That works as second normal form. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go to Excel. I'm going to close out of my models one. I'm going to reopen up my J23 cars, my main database. My main table. This time I do not need any of these, the model, the color. I don't need any of that. What I need is my drive type, which is column E, and my cost of those drive, which is column F. So I'm getting rid of all the other columns that I don't need. I'm just going to hit delete. And they've moved over, which is good. I can go back to my exam and check my exam, and I'm sure the exam says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are 5 different drive types, so I know that I'm looking for those 5 different drive types, and I can just move this over and have a look. So E is going to be my electric cell, H is going to be my hydro drive, D is going to be my dynamic electric, so I've already got the D there, so I don't need that one. I can get rid of that, and I can go delete that. R is a different one, which is my residual battery, and let's just see how we go. Let's go delete here. Now, there's another couple of things we could do here. I'm not going to do this, but we could do. We could actually put these titles in here. The company has the following drive types. Nowhere in our document, in our database, have we shown the name of the drive type. We've just got the letter. So maybe we would want to put those in, and in fact we could do that. Well, I might do that as well and show you that now. All right, but let's go back to our exam and just make sure we get this right. Okay, so let's go with the only other one we haven't got is Q. Let's go delete this, and then let's delete everything else down here because this is now redundant data. Delete. Now, if you wanted to do this, this is not essential. I don't think you'll get a mark for this, but I'm just going to, might as well do it to make it easier to understand. In fact, if I do this, the problem with doing this is I'm then having redundant data. I'm saying E is the same as electrical drive, it's redundant, so actually I probably shouldn't do this. But you can see E is electric, D is our dynamic here, quantum is our Q, we've got 2 Ds in there, so I need to get rid of that D. Delete that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I've got my 5. Delete that. We don't need that. Let's go File, Save As. And this time I'm going to save it as Drive. Make sure it's a CSV. Hit Save. Okay, close out of that. Go back to here. Now, remember, this is going to be my primary key. I'm going to check my structure. For drive type, it's 1 character. Now, if I go to my drive table, check my structure, primary key, 1 character, drive cost is a float. That's perfect, right? So I'm going to go import, choose the file, choose drive, hit upload, go down here, check all of this information, hit import. It's all gone green. Check my drive type. My drives have got all of my different drive types here. It's got the cost that relates to there. Let's go back to our cars table. We now don't need this costs table on here because, like I said, this doesn't relate to this primary key. Now it's on here with my structure. These costs relate to its primary key. So this is second normal form. So I'm going to go back to my cars here. Drive cost, I'm going to drop that column. I'm going to go to drive cost, click there. I'm going to drop that column, hit OK. And I've now got my drive there. Now, if I browse it at the moment, it's not relational. They're not clicking, right? So I need to make sure I have that relationship. So I go back to my structure, hit my relational view, make sure I go on update cascade. I want to change my drive type. I want to link to the drive table and I want it to be drive type, and I hit save and it's gone green. Now if I go back to my first table, I have my registration, which goes to the eco drive, which is a relational table, my color, which is a relational table, my drive type, which is a relational table, and my extras code over here, which is a relational table. The saloon does relate directly to this car because what it's saying is this car, this registration,
is a saloon. Now maybe, and I don't know, but in theory, you might be able to get an Eco Drive black with electric drive that's a estate car, right? So this actually relates to this registration directly. And in the same sense, if you're buying, say, a Ferrari, you can buy a Ferrari from 1960, 1970, 1980, 1990, whatever. So the year here relates to this registration. So if I'm looking at my second normal form, I'm saying this relates directly to the primary key. This relates 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 to the primary key. We still have one thing that I don't like, which is the color. And the colour needs to be, and I've just sorted it by that, the colour needs to be not the word of the colour. The colour really needs to be the colour code, the paint code. So if I go to here, I've got paint code here, colour code here. So we need to work out how we're going to do that. And if I actually look at the structure of this table, I've got the colour as the primary key, and I don't want it to be the primary key. So I'm going to have to go through and do a little bit of tweaking to change that, so the paint code, and I'll show you how to do that next. Okay, now we're going to fix another mistake that I think is in the database that we've got at the moment. This is 8 different colours, and if we go to the colours section here, you can see we've got the colour, and it's the colour that's the primary key, and I really don't like that. So what I actually want to do is I want to remove that from being the primary key. And when I first set up this database, I could have chosen the paint code as the primary key, and I made the decision to choose it as colour. So now I've got to go back and problem solve and troubleshoot this. But when you first set up the file, you could have done it as the paint code. But I'm going to change it now to the paint code here. So I just want to make sure I get the wording right. I'm going to go to my paint table, and it's called paint code, one word. It has 1 character, and it's an integer. So if I go to my cars table here, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove that relationship to the primary key on the paint table. So I go to here and I say, okay, I want to remove the relationship to the primary key to the color. That's it, the paint color there. I don't like that, so I'm going to drop that key straight away. That's the first thing I'm going to do. So I've removed that. So now you'll see they're not interactive. It's just data in there. It's not a relationship. Now I want to somehow put in a paint code column in here. Now putting a column in, that's not so hard. We can go to the structure and we can say add 1 column after color. So let's add it after the color section here. Let's go. And this new column I'm going to call paint code. So it matches the paint code on the paint table. And I'm going to make it an integer of 1 length. That's all I'm going to do, and I'm going to hit save. Now if I go to my structure and have a look, I've got paint code coming in after color, and I can go browse and I can see that I have the paint code that's in there, but the paint codes are all 0. Now, what you do not want to do is go through and have to change every time you see black, write the number 2, and every time you see grey, write the number 3. You don't want to do that. There has to be a faster way to do that. And there's 2 different ways to do this. Now you can do this, there's probably multiple different ways to do it. You could go back to Excel, choose the paint codes in all the correct paint codes and put them in and import them as CSV. We did that kind of with our models, and I want to try and show you a different way to do it this time so that you get both techniques. What we're going to do is we're actually going to go into this cars table and we're going to use some SQL, a SQL query. We're going to run a query that changes some of this. So if I go to the go to SQL, and I go here and I'm going to paste my query in here, and I'm going to say update the cars table. So it's my cars table here, update my cars table, set the paint code to 2 where the color equals black. And I know that because if I look at my Excel file, I go back to J3 cars, no, actually I want to look at the paint one, so if I go to open the paint one, paint here, I know that black is my code number 2. Midnight blue is my code number 1. So I know these things down here. In fact, I'll leave that open down there so we can have a little look at it. And I could say, update the cars table, set the paint code to 2, where the color equals black. So I'm going to go through and do that. I'm going to hit go, and it goes through and says changed 41 rows. okay? So if I go back to my cars table, let's have a little browse of it. Everywhere that was black, I now see the paint code number 2. Now it's not linked to the paint table yet because we removed the primary key, but I have got the correct number in there. So let's go through and do a few more of those. Let's do midnight blue, okay? So go to my SQL, paste my SQL in here. Should copy that the right way so I don't have to keep changing this, cars. So let's copy that, Command C. Right, so this time I know paint code number 1, because I'm looking down here, is midnight blue, and I have to write it exactly the same. Midnight blue with a capital B. Okay, so everywhere where it says midnight blue, I'm going to change to paint code number 1. Now you could make one long SQL statement that had set paint code number 2 where color equals this, set paint code number 3 where color equals that. But I want to do them one at a time because I want to see the files update, and I want to show you for the example of this video that it's actually working, right? So set paint code 1 where midnight blue, hit go. That updated 29 rows. I'm going to browse and just have a look, and I can see midnight blue 1, that's correct, right? Let's go back to my SQL. Let's paste it again. This time we're going to go to 3, and we're going to say I want it to be metallic grey. Metallic grey, and I'm going to set it to 3. Check down here, metallic grey, number 3, it's correct, hit go. Go back to my SQL, do the next one, Command V. This time I want to set it to paint code number 4, and paint code number 4 is granite. Now, if you don't know this SQL code, then obviously the easiest way for you would be to go to Excel and just change it over in Excel and do like the same thing. You do a query in Excel and change from one line to the other line. And I'm doing that here. Or you import as your primary key right at the very start, the paint code instead of importing the color, which is maybe a mistake I made at the start, but that's okay. That's what happens in exams. And it's better if you know how to problem solve these things rather than just give you the perfect answer straight away, right? Firefly, go. Okay, let's go to SQL query here. Command V. This time I'm going to change number 6, which is sunrise. Okay, go. Sunrise is done. Go to the SQL query, do the next one. Okay, V, and this time it's going to be white, which is 7. Oops. White, go. And the last one is going to be ochre, which is number 8. So this is okay. So now if I go back to my browse my section here, I shouldn't see any zeros in here. They should all be a number, which I can see there from the preview. I've gone through and got them all. Now we can go back and make that a primary key and link those two databases, and I can actually drop this color one here because we've got the paint code. I don't need the color one in the color column in here. So let's make the link first, and then I'll drop the color. Oh, let's drop the column while I'm here. Why not? Let's just go to structure. Let's go to color, and let's say color. Yep, color. I want to drop that color right there. Drop. Okay, good. That's gone. I can check my browse. Have a quick look at it. There we go, the color's gone, but I do have the paint code, but it's not linking. So let's go and make that link. Check my paint code. Yep, that's fine. Go to my cars, go to structure, relational view. We want to cascade this. We want to change the paint code color. We want to get that paint code from the paint table, and we want it to be color, and we hit save. And there's something wrong here, right? So there's something that I haven't done right. Cannot add a foreign key constraint. So let's have a look. There's something there that's not quite right. So let's problem solve that. All right, so I've just got an error when I've tried to import this as the primary key. So we need to go back to the paint table and have a look and see why did that happen. And if I look at the structure here, here's my problem. The paint code is not a primary key. My primary key at the moment is my color. Now I didn't want that. Remember I said I wanted to make the paint code my primary color. Now there's lots of different ways that we can go and fix this. We're going to try and remove the primary key, which is a difficult process. Then we can go and remake this as a primary key. all of those things I think are a long way to do it. What I would do is click on the table here, I'd go to operations, and I actually would just delete the table. So drop that table completely, gone, it's gone. Now I'm going to go through and add the table the same way that we did at the very start. I'm just going to put paint. I'm going to call this one paint code, which we know it had to be. We're going to add color. And the last one was the paint mixture, let's have a look at the Excel file, see exactly what it's called on the paint file. Okay, it's the paint breakdown. I think I had it as paint breakdown, so let's put that, paint. Now the paint breakdown was a float, and we're going to allow it 1, 2, 3, 4 characters. So we did this before, we're just redoing it. This time though, we're going to make the paint code the primary key. Integer, 1 character, color is varchar, and let's make that 14, maybe 15. Let's do it as 15. We're giving it a little bit of space in case the words. Really what we should do is look at midnight blue or metallic grey and count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, space 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So let's make it, I'll leave it as 15 because it gives it a little bit of space in case, okay? Now we want to make this one the primary key this time, so our paint code is going to be our primary key. We hit OK, and then we hit save. So we're back to where we were. We've got our table, we've got it set up. Our color is not our primary key anymore. Now our paint is our primary key. We're going to import our paint file exactly the same as we did earlier. So I'm just going to choose J3 Paint, upload, import. So for the sake of 1 minute, we've reset up the whole table and it should be all fine. And it was a quick way to do it. We didn't have to mess around changing primary keys and deleting them. That we did it really quickly, just re-imported the data. Now, if I check the structure here, it's the primary key, paint code. Now, if I go up to my cars and I say, okay, let's look at the structure of this. Let's create a relational view. Let's go to on update, let's cascade it. We want to go to the paint code. We want to go to the paint table, and it came in this time as paint code, and we hit save, and I've got the green light. Go back to my table, go back to my original table. Now I've got registration is my primary key. Model name is a relational link to a model table. Paint code is a foreign key link to the paint table. Drive type is a foreign key link to the extra table. My body style relates directly to my registration. My year level relates directly to my registration, and the extras code, including the blank, has a link to my registration and is a relational database, relational table as well. So we have finished now second normal form. There's one thing that we still haven't gone and addressed yet, which I really want to make sure that we get correct, and that is in our extras, where we have 3 things in one column. I need to address that next. Okay, so I've moved here to the extras table, and the extra table has these 3 sections that I don't like, that it's got all these extra parts on it. Now, there are several ways, again, that we could do this, but I want to remember, I want to keep it in first normal form, and then second normal form, and then third normal form. Now, one of the things that's really important about first and second normal form is that each of these elements relate directly to the primary key. Now, at the moment, they actually do. Cruise control, this extra cruise control relates to the C. This cruise control LED lighting, it relates to the CL. But I don't like that there are 2 elements in one column. It shouldn't be that way for our first normal form. Now, I could create another table and call it a parts table, and the parts table would have 4 columns. It would have part number 1, which would be, say, cruise control, part number 2, LED lighting, part number 3, satellite navigation, and then I would have 3 different ones, and then they would relate to their own primary key, which would come back here and relate to this. But then I'm creating a table that's going to have 3 extra columns. Now I can solve that problem by creating 2 extra columns in here, and I'm getting the same thing. I'm getting the same thing where each of those columns do directly relate to the primary key, so it does conform to second normal form. So rather than create another table called parts, which the exam doesn't ask me for another table about the parts, it just says make it its simplest form. This is not its simplest form. So I'm going to go to the structure and I'm going to change this a little bit, and I'm going to go to this extras one, change it. I'm going to actually call it extra one. I'm going to take the S off and call it extra one. And I'm going to hit save. Then I'm going to add 2 more columns, right? So I'm going to add 2 columns after extra one. I'm going to hit go, and I'm going to call them extra 2, and extra 3. I'm going to make them varchar because they're variable characters, allowing for the length of what's written there. I'm going to say cruise control is probably the longest, so I'm just going to say 15 for both of them. I could count them up exactly, but for the purpose of this, 15 I'm sure is long enough. Okay, now I'm going to go back and browse my section here, and I've got extra 2 and extra 3, and they haven't got anything in them. So I want to move some of this data around. So whatever extra 1 is, I'm going to leave in that first position. Whatever's in the second position, so after the first comma, I'm going to move into extra 2, and whatever's in the third position, which really only affects this one here, I'm going to move into the extra 3. Okay, so if I go to this one, I hit edit, and I go to here, and I'm going to get this LED lighting. Command X to cut that, and I'm going to hit that's extra in here. I'm going to hit paste in there for LED 2, for extra 2 I mean, and then I'm going to hit go. So now if I go back and look at my structure here, I've got extra number 1 is cruise control, and extra number 2 is LED lighting, which still relates to the primary key here. CL, cruise control, relates to that, LED relates to that, so it conforms to second normal form, which is what I'm asking. So I'm going to do the same for all of these. This one, let's go Command X, paste it there, get rid of the comma, get rid of that, Command X, paste it there. Okay, so there are my 3 things, and I'm going to hit go. Have I got a comma? Data too long for the column and extra. So satellite navigation is longer than the length that I've given it. So I'm going to have to go back and change my column length for those. So in fact, I'm going to go back to my structure, and I'm going to change the column length for. In fact, extra 1 I had 64. So I'm going to change the column length for all of those, right? So let's go to here and go. Extra 1, that's right, change this, let's make that 64. I've allowed space in those, so this is where you can allow a little bit more space in your character length, and then it'll help your program down the track a little bit. So let's have a look at my browser right now. So I've got to work on this one, edit, let's get LED lighting, Command X, Command V, satellite navigation, Command X, Command V, and get rid of these commas. Alright, so that should be fine. Hit go. There we go. So now I've got my 3 different sections, extra 2, extra 3. Let's do this one, edit, cut that, paste it here. That's done. Go. And is there any more? Yes, this one down here, LS. So let's edit this, remove that, and remove this. Okay, and let's hit go. Now, this is much better. It shouldn't have multiple entries in one column. So now we've got one individual entry. This is that atomic versus non-atomic, right? So this is atomic now. So this is better. That's correct. That's correct. They still all relate directly to their primary key, so that gives me my second normal form. My table is substantially better. I didn't have to create another table to put in 3 different parts to get essentially the same code. For this example, this works. If you had something that had 50 different parts or 30 different parts or something like that, of course, you're going to create another table. But for this example, for the exam, that's all you need to do, and we've solved that problem. So now we want to move on and look at third normal form. All right, so now we want to look at third normal form, which is the second last part that we want to do here. Now, third normal form has its own set of rules, so we'll have a look at those really quickly. The table must be in second normal form. Now, I am very confident now that our tables are all in second normal form. We've got relationships, we've got them all relying on their primary keys. In same thing here, the cost relies on the primary key. In our extras, the extras are all related to or relate directly to the primary key. Our models, the price here relates directly to the primary key, and the paint breakdown and the paint color both relate directly to the primary key. So I'm pretty confident we are at second normal form all the way through here. So we've already fulfilled that third normal form section there. Now the next one says non-key attributes must depend on every part of the primary key only. They cannot depend on other non-key attributes. So that sounds like a really complex statement, but let's have a look at this example right here, because I think this is a pretty good example. So we've got a student at a school, and over the course of the year, the student has 4 exams, right? So they do 4 different exams during the course of the year, and the 4 different exams give them a different percentage mark for each exam. So in this situation, we've got exam 1, exam 2. I'm just fixing these columns. There we go, exam 3, exam 4. And because of the result from those 4 exams, we get this final grade of A. Now here's the problem for third normal form. It says non-key attributes, so this is not a key, it's not a primary key, so it's a non-key attribute, must depend on every part of the primary key only. They cannot depend on other non-key attributes. So this one here, this A, actually depends on the 4 grades that are given here to give them the final grade. So this does not conform to third normal form. You're saying here that these 4 marks here are what makes up this final grade, which is correct. That's the way that you would work out the mark at the end of the year. But in a database, that cannot be dependent on these 4 other ones in third normal form. So that would be incorrect. So therefore, to do it the right way, you would have a table that has the 4 marks in them, and you would have a separate table that has the grade in them. So therefore, this grade relates to this student and is only dependent on that student number. It doesn't rely on the information here. Now, to get to the grade, you still might be adding those up and doing a numerical, doing an equation to do that. But in the database, this is only related to the student. And these 4 marks aren't related to each other, they're only related to the student. So this falls into third normal form. Each piece of data, non-key attribute data, only relates to the primary key. So now if we go back to here and we have a really quick look through our database here, we can see this, and I actually said that in the last little bit of the video. The eco drive, which is the model name, relates directly to the registration, which is the primary key. The paint code relates to the registration, which is the primary key. The paint code has nothing to do with the model drive. They don't relate to each other in any way. The model of the car and the paint, you can have a different model with different paint. They do not relate to each other, so they're not dependent on each other. So that's third normal form. The drive type, which I think this is the electric drive, has nothing to do with any of the others except the registration in here. Now the name might be Eco Drive, but you might have an Eco Drive that's a hybrid car. It doesn't have to be electric. This is saying this doesn't relate to the paint and doesn't relate to the model. So you might have, well, there is no relationship there. So that means this is third normal form. Now the saloon, and I gave this example before, you might have an Eco Drive car that's the same colour and uses electric, but it's an estate, as a wagon, right? So this doesn't relate to any of those, it only relates to the registration. So that's third normal form. Now the extras for this car is S. We can just check what that is. S is our satellite navigation, fantastic. So you could have an Eco Drive car with the same paint, with the same transmission, and it could be a saloon, but it might be an LS, or it might be something different. So this does not relate to any of these. And the same thing with the year. You could have exactly the same car from 2019, right? So all of these do not relate to anything except for the registration. So this is in third normal form. I know this table's in third normal form. So now I can go back to my drive and have a quick look here. Well, this has only got 2 things, so they have to relate to each other. My extras, all of these extras relate to the extras code. And think about this. You can have LED lighting without cruise control, which is this one down here. You can have satellite navigation without LED lighting, without cruise control. So these ones do not relate to each other. It doesn't matter if you've got satellite navigation or LED or cruise control, they don't relate to each other. But they do all relate to the primary key, which is the CLS. If you've got CLS, then you do have all three of them. So this falls into now third normal form, which is really important. If we go to model, the model only has two things, so they have to relate to each other, third normal form, and you go to paint. The paint code, the color relates to the paint code. The breakdown relates to the paint code. This breakdown, you could have another car, in fact we've got it here, black and granite, they both have the same paint breakdown, but they don't relate to the color, they only relate to the paint code. So this is in third normal form. So as we've gone along and we've created our database, we've actually put it into first, second and third normal form, and we've finished that section. Now if we go back to our exam, we can hide this now, go back and find my exam, which is here. If we go back to my exam, we have created a unique registration. We've got a table for models with 7 cars. We've got a drive type with 5 different cars. We've got the company manufacturers 8 different colours. We've done that. We've got an extras table with 3 different things. We're now up to this last section, which really should be our quickest, not even that line, just this section here, which should be our quickest little section, which says we need to, the manufacturing cost of the sale price is calculated at runtime in a query, which means if we run a query called finance, it has to get the body, the car body, the drive type, the extras and the paint, put them all together and come up with a final cost for us. That's what it wants us to do. The cost of the paint will be calculated at 200 multiplied by the colour factor. Okay, so this is saying we have to go and get that colour factor, that paint breakdown. We have to go and get that. And then we have to get the sale price of the car is 1,000 plus the manufacturing costs multiplied by 1.8. So this is the equation that we have to use to complete this final thing. Your local currency where appropriate, store with 2 decimal places. We've been using floats, so 2 decimal places shouldn't be a problem for us. Let's go ahead and do this last little section here. Okay, so there are 2 ways that we can put in a runtime SQL query. Now, remember, right in the question it says runtime, right? And I think that's really important. I think it says it in there a couple of times. So what runtime means is, it says it there and it says it there. What runtime means is the database is finished, it's completed, and then you're doing a query on it. You're running a query on the database after the database is finished, okay? So at this stage, our database is finished. You can see everything's done. We've got all of our tables. We've followed the criteria. Everything is done completely. So now we want to put in a query. Now there are 2 ways we can do that query. We can either go to SQL here, and we can run the query in there, or we can actually go to this one called query, and if you're not sure about your SQL, this can help you build it. So for example, you could say select cars, select registration, select drive cost. You might go here to say select extras, select extra cost, and then we go update the query, and it'll start to write the query for us down here, right? Now, that's one way you could do it. We are not going to do it that way. I think that is a simple way and you could work things out, but I also think there's a few little tricks here that we want to run, and we'd like to run the query ourselves. So I'm going to go back to SQL. I'm just going to say, are you sure you want to leave? Yes, I want to leave. And we're going to write our own query in here, and I'm going to talk our way through it. Now, one of the things it says this has to be done in a query called finance. So I want to think, where am I going to save this information, this query? I'm going to save it into something called finance, so that the examiner, when they get it, they can read it and say, okay, there's finance. So to do this, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a table, and I'm going to call that finance. So I've followed the exact rule that the examiner has asked me to do. I've created a table, and I'm calling it finance. Okay, finance, it's done, it's exactly the same. Now, what do I want to put into that table? Okay, so I want to put in here, I'm going to put select, and I need to spell it correctly, select, and now what is it that I want to actually select, right? An expression was expected. An expression was expected near. Okay, well, we'll keep doing that. There will be an expression near that, okay? Select. Now, what am I going to select? I'm going to select from the cars table, so that's my first table. I want to select the registration, which is our primary key. So that's the first thing I want to select. I'm I'm going to put a comma after that. From the drive table, so I'm going to write drive. From the drive table, I would like to select the drive cost. Because that's we're going to be doing an equation, I need to select the drive cost. Right, from the models table, so I'm just going to model, and I put a full stop, I'm going to be selecting the model cost. From the paint table, I'm going to be selecting and I called it the paint breakdown, so I'm going to select the paint breakdown. And from the extras table, I am going to be selecting the extras cost. So I'm going to go extras cost. So now I've selected the elements that I think I need to put into this new finance table to do my runtime query, which is what I'm doing right now. Now, I need to tell them also from which tables. I can't just say cars.registration, drive.drive cost. I actually need to say from the right tables. So I'm going to put in here from, and I'm going to put in cars, that's my first table, comma, drive, comma, model, comma, paint, comma, and extras. So now I've told my query where to go and find these things that I want you to select. So we're going to create a new table. We're going to find these columns. We're going to find them on these tables here. And now what are we going to do with them? And how do I refine that to make sure it's exactly right? So this is the first bit. Now this is a really tricky little bit of code, and I think this section of the query, I think this is the point where it changes from being maybe a B or a C student into an A or an A star student. This is where you need to be really thinking about how you're structuring this query, and this is where you can gain some really great marks. So we're going to do this query where what happens. And what we're going to look at is we're going to say where the primary key on the cars table matches, the foreign key on the cars table matches the primary key on its own table, so that we're correctly getting the data from that table. I'll try and show you as I go. So from the cars table, we are going to be looking for the drive type, which is our foreign key. So we're going to be looking for drive type, which is our foreign key. And that has to be the same as from the drive table. Oops, not drive. From the drive table, that has to be the same as the drive type. So do you understand what we're doing there? We're saying make sure that the key on the cars table is the right key for the drive table. Make sure that they are a matching key. That's what we want to do. But we also need to do that for the models table, for the paint table, for the extras table. We need to do that for each of these tables to make sure that we're getting the right information, matching the right key to get it across. So I need to put in an AND here. So we're doing, that'll get my drive one. Now we want to make sure we get our model name one. So I'm going to say from the cars table, select model name, and it must match from the models table the model name. So I'm using those keys to find the information and get it correct. So I've now done the drive table, I've done the model table, I'm going to do paint and extras. So let's do another AND cars dot where are we at this time? We're going to be doing extras code equals extras dot, and this one has to be extras code. And the last one, and cars dot paint code. It's not coming up for me. Paint code. Oh, it's because I put car, not cars. Cars dot paint code equals paint dot paint code. Okay, so I just want to go over that one more time, because this little thing here is the key to the whole thing working. Okay, we're going to create a new table called finance. We're going to select from the cars table the registration column, the drive table, the drive cost, the model table, the model cost, the paint table, the paint breakdown, the extras table, the extra cost. And these are the different tables that we're getting them from. Now, to prove and make sure that we're getting the right information, we're checking against the primary keys and the foreign keys, right? So the drive type's the primary key, and it's a foreign key on the car table. So we're only getting information that matches up with that. We're only getting information that matches up with that, matches up with that, matches up with that. Okay, so we know that's right. Now, how are we going to store that information? We need to alter our new finance table. We need to store that information on our finance table. Now we need to end this little selection here. We've done this little selection here, so I'm going to put in what's called a delimiter, which is a semicolon there that says, okay, you've got all this information, now let's do something with it. So we're kind of stopping this process here. We've collected the information, now we're going to actually use this information. And what we're going to do is we're going to alter our new table. So we're going to alter table, which is going to be called our finance table. So we're altering our new finance table, and we are going to add a column, and the column is going to be called total cost. And the total cost, we want this to be a float, right? Because we know that it has to have a float and it has to have decimal places because our exam told us that. So we've collected this information. We're altering our table. We're adding a column. The column's going to be called float, and that's the end of that little section. So we put a semicolon and a delimiter there. Right, so now what we have to do is do our final line of code, or final 2 lines of query, to make sure that the equation is done correctly. So what we're going to do is we are going to update the finance table. Okay, so we make sure that we've got update the finance table right there. And what we want to update on that table is the total cost column that we just created. So we're going to say set total cost. So that's our new total cost column that we just created there on our finance table. We're going to set that to equal, and we're going to equal the equation that they've asked us to do in the exam, which is the manufacturer's cost, 1,000 plus the manufacturer's cost, multiplied by 1.8, but we must remember that the paint breakdown has to be multiplied by 200 as well. So let's work that out. Let's do exactly what they've said. 1,000 plus manufacturer's cost. I'm going to put this in brackets so I can get all the manufacturer's costs in together. And it's going to be the drive cost plus the model cost plus the extras cost plus the paint breakdown. Now remember, the paint breakdown has to be multiplied by 200. So I'm going to put a set of brackets around that. And in there, I'm going to put multiplied by 200. So I know I've now got my paint breakdown multiplied by 200. That is added to my extra cost, my model cost, my drive cost, which is all now my manufacturer's costs all in together. And I've got 1,000 plus my manufacturer's costs. And in fact, they've got brackets around that, so I'm going to put brackets around that whole thing as well. Okay, so now I've got that part of the equation correct. Now it also says multiplied by 1.8. So I'm going to say multiplied by 1.8. So now I've got my exact equation 100% correct. Except it says that I need to have 2 decimal places. Now there's a function in SQL where I can use rounding. I just go R-O-U-N-D, round, and then I need to put a bracket. And then inside that bracket, I can say everything inside those brackets is going to be rounded. But at the moment, it's going to be rounded to no decimal places. So just at the end, I'm going to put comma 2 inside the bracket. So that's now saying round it to 2 decimal places. Okay, I'm going to click this go right now, and it should work perfectly and create my finance table with everything I have on it, including the equation, and it should give me a new table down here. Let's hit go. And there we go, we've got 3 greens right there, which is fantastic. If I look down here in my bottom left-hand corner, I've got a new table in here called finance. We're going to have a quick look at that table, and there it is. I have drive cost, model cost, paint breakdown, extra cost, and then the equation has been run and produced these answers for our total cost over here, which is our total cost of our cars, and all of those total costs line up with the registration of each vehicle. So this vehicle would cost that much money to purchase. This vehicle would cost that much money to purchase. So that's it. We have actually completed every single thing in this box that's been requested. We've done it all the right way. We've done everything that we needed. Now the only thing we need to do is save our file and get an A star. We're going to go back to our main database and click on the whole database. So we're not just exporting one table, we're exporting the whole database, and we're going to save it. We go back to our exam and we check the way that the exam has to be saved. So it says save your data with a file name called cars, followed by your centre number and your candidate number. So I'm actually just going to highlight and copy and paste that. Go here to my whole database, I hit export. I choose that I want to export it as a SQL file. I click export and it's saved to my exported files down here. Now, on my computer, when we export, it goes to my downloads folder, and you can see right there it is. It's called Tawa Eco Cars .sql, but I know for my exam I have to call it cars underscore my exam center underscore and then my student number right there. So my student number might be 1234. So I'd have to change that to 1234. And then your exam center, depending on where you are, we would be, I don't know, Seychelles, or 123. For example, that's only an example. So there I've got my file. It's 30K. I would copy that off onto the USB that the examiner wants, and that is my SQL database, and that is the end of my exam. Right, so the final piece of the puzzle I just want to add to the end of the video is the mark scheme. Okay, so you can download this off the internet because this is a past paper, so you're allowed to do that. May, June 2023, mark scheme, practical paper number 2. And remember, we're only looking at question 1, right? We're not looking at question 2, so let's go and have a look. So here's our database. Now, there's a few things where you can see where you get your marks, right? So we'll go through this really quickly. First of all, you've got a cars table, a model table, a paint table, a drive table, and an extras table. So that one about the drive and the one about the model, that was correct. We needed an extra table for both of those. So we've got 5 tables on there. There are no ID fields. So we haven't gone in and put cars ID, models ID, paint ID. We didn't do any of those because we already had the registration, we already had the model type, we already had the paint code. So we didn't create any IDs, so we get a mark for that. All tables have no repeated fields. We made sure of that when we did our normalisation, and they have short, meaningful names. Well, we did that. We made sure they were all correct. So you would have got all of the marks there, which is really good. The relationships, as we built the relationships, if the relationships failed and we had red messages during our things, our relationships wouldn't have worked. Now, you can go through and check every single one of these relationships, but what we've got is correct, right? So all of these, the model, one to many, colours, one to many, drive, one to many, extras, one to many. We did that, right? So you can check that on the database that we've done, but they're all correct, so I would have got all of those marks. So we go down here to the cars table. Now, appropriate field name, but the first one is appropriate table name. So it doesn't say J23 cars, it just says cars. So I'm really glad we went back and changed that to the correct title, table name on there, because that's worth a mark to us. Registration number is the primary key. Registration is 7 characters. We did that. Alphanumeric, we did it as variable character, which is the same thing, so that's right. Model field, 12 characters long. I actually think I did 13 or 15, but I did it consistent all the way through, and I left a little space to allow for spaces and those sorts of things. I think you would still get that mark if you're the examiner, because the idea of the examiner is they don't take marks away, they add marks if you've done the right thing. Now, you've got a fixed data length for the fields, and it's the same across all tables, so I think you actually probably would get that. Colour data set to type integer, well, we did that. Remember, we started off with it as a varchar and we had the colour name, and then we went through and we changed it and we decided it was going to be the colour code and we changed it to an integer, so that was correct. Alphanumeric. So all of these, you can just go through and check these. We've done all of these. Let's just talk about this one, at least one appropriate validation routine. Now, validation routine makes sure that when the data is being entered into the database, it's being entered correctly and it's valid. Now, we did that in one case. We went in and we put null, where they could have nothing in that table, and we made a specific choice to do that, to put null in. But we also, by making our character length, our value lengths, by making sure that there are right character types, those sorts of things, we're putting in validation routines. But I suppose if it's asking explicitly for one appropriate one, well then that one where we went in and we put null, that is actually a validation routine, all right? To allow there to be no data in that would be valid, okay? So we'd get our 1 mark there. Drive table, appropriate title, so these are the same sort of things. Drive code as a primary key, alphanumeric. So all of these are really similar to the first table up here. If you've set up your table correctly, which we did, see it says 1 correct field length. It doesn't say what that length has to be. It's 1 consistent correct field length, which I think is the way they're going to mark all of it. The only place we may lose a mark is this explicitly says 12. So I think we did 13. So we may lose 1 mark there. But for everything else, it looks like we've done all of these things correctly. 2 decimal places on our currency, we did that, 2 decimal places, because we made them a float. Everything else there's correct. Everything else there seems to be correct. Our paint table, that all seems to be correct. Paint code as the primary key, we did that. Paint code as an integer, we did that. Colour field length 13, I think we did actually 13. So all of those seem to be correct, okay? Factor field as a decimal, we did that. We made it a float, right? So that's correct. Calculation fields. Now, there's a whole pile of extra marks here, individual marks for these questions, and we actually did this. So there's a cost field, and we did that as a final cost field. That was our last cost field in our financial table. We made sure we had our plus 200 on our paint factor, right? So we had our 200 times the paint factor. We actually did that. All the cost fields, tables, all tables and field names in square brackets. Now, we didn't have it in square brackets, so we probably lost a mark on that one in the cost field because we didn't have it in square brackets. But we did have a cost field that came out with the right answer, so I'm not sure about that one. Maybe we need to go back and have a look at that. Price field, 1.8 times that, we did that. Cost plus 1,000, we did that in brackets, so we did do our stuff in brackets. The only one I've got is Y square brackets. So that's one where if you're sitting in an exam and you don't get the square brackets and you miss out on 1 mark, then it's 1 mark. You know, you're still going to get your A star. So that's it. That's the end of the database example. It's good to go back and look at the mark schemes, because then you can go back and say, oh, what is that square brackets? I'm going to have a look at that. And what is my character length for my cars table? Was it 12 or was it 15? I can go back and check those sorts of things. So it's always good to go back after you've seen the mark scheme and have a second look at your file. But at this stage, this is the end of the video.